Esther 1. The King's Wild Party and Queen Vashti's Exit. 8. So this went down back in the day when King Xerxes, aka Ahasuerus, was running the whole Persian Empire from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces deep. Big boss energy. Now, in the 3rd year of his reign, he threw this crazy, extravagant party for all his officials, nobles, and top military dudes. This wasn't no weekend turn-up. This man partied for 6 months straight. Yeah, 180 days of flexing his wealth, power, and luxury. After that, he wasn't even done. He threw another week-long party just for the people in the palace, from the highest officials to the common folk. The palace was decked out. Gold everywhere, fancy curtains, marble floors. And the drinks? Unlimited. The king basically said, "Ain't no restrictions. Drink as much as you want." Now, while Xerxes and the fellas were turning up, Queen Vashti was throwing her own event for the ladies in the royal palace. But on the 7th day, when Xerxes was good and drunk, he told his boys to go bring Queen Vashti out so everybody could see how fine she was. He wanted to show her off like a trophy. But Vashti, she wasn't having it. She said, "Nah, I'm good." She straight up refused to come out. King Xerxes was heated, like embarrassed in front of all his people. So he called his advisors, the ones who knew the law, and asked, "What should we do about this? My own queen just played me in front of everybody." One of his guys, Memucan, was like, "Your Highness, this ain't just about you. If word gets out that Vashti disrespected you, every woman in the kingdom is gonna start thinking she can do the same to her man. Dudes everywhere gonna be catching attitude from their wives. We gotta set a precedent." So, he suggested they strip Vashti of her title and find a new queen who would respect the king. And just like that, the king agreed. They sent out an official decree to all the provinces, basically saying, "Men run their houses, and that's final." And that's how Queen Vashti got booted from the throne. Esther 2, from orphan to queen. So, after some time, King Xerxes finally started cooling off from his whole situation with Vashti. But now he was sitting there like, dang, I ain't got no queen no more. His advisors peeped the vibe and came up with a plan. "All right, Your Majesty, let's hold a royal beauty contest. We'll round up the baddest women from all over the kingdom, bring them to the palace, and give them top-tier beauty treatments. Then you pick the one you like best, and she becomes the new queen." Xerxes was feeling that idea, so they made it happen. Now, in the city of Susa, there was a Jewish dude named Mordecai. He was from the tribe of Benjamin, one of the exiles from Jerusalem. He had a cousin named Hadassah, but folks called her Esther, and she was fine, like real fine. She had been raised by Mordecai because her parents had passed away. When the king's men started gathering women for the contest, Esther got scooped up and taken to the palace. There, she caught the eye of Haggai, the guy in charge of all the ladies. He liked her right away and started giving her VIP treatment, special food, the best beauty treatments, and the best spot in the harem. But per Mordecai's advice, she didn't tell anyone she was Jewish. Now, all these women had to go through a whole year of beauty treatments before they could even see the king. 6 months with oils, 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. Yeah, they were really serious about skincare. When it was their turn, they could take anything they wanted with them to impress the king. When Esther's turn came, she kept it simple and only took what Haggai recommended. And when she finally met the king, it was a wrap. Xerxes was smitten. Out of all the women, he loved Esther the most. So, he put the crown on her head and made her the new queen. Then he threw another big party in her honor and handed out gifts like it was Christmas. Meanwhile, Mordecai was still hanging around the palace gates, keeping an eye on Esther. One day, he overheard 2 of the king's guards plotting to assassinate Xerxes. Mordecai wasn't about to let that slide, so he told Esther, and she reported it to the king in Mordecai's name. After investigating, they found out it was true, and the two dudes got executed. This whole thing was written down in the king's official records, but Mordecai didn't get any credit for it. Yet. And just like that, Esther went from an orphan to the Queen of Persia, but the real drama was just getting started. Esther 3, Haman's power trip and his beef with Mordecai. So after all that, King Xerxes decided to promote this dude named Haman. He gave him a top-tier position, putting him over all the other officials in the kingdom. Haman was feeling himself heavy, so much so that the king ordered everybody to bow down and show respect whenever Haman rolled through. And everybody did, except Mordecai. Mordecai wasn't with all that. The palace officials kept asking him, "Bruh, why you not bowing like everybody else?" But Mordecai stood 10 toes down. He was Jewish, and he wasn't about to worship anybody but God. Now, when Haman found out Mordecai was refusing to bow, he was livid. But instead of just coming at Mordecai personally, he took it to a whole different level. He decided he wanted to wipe out all the Jews in the kingdom. Yeah, all of them. Haman started plotting. He cast lots, aka Purim, which was kind of like rolling dice, to pick the best date to make his move. Once he had the timing set, he went to King Xerxes with his little snake speech. "Your Majesty, there's this certain group of people scattered throughout your kingdom who don't follow your laws. They different, and honestly, they're a problem. It'd be in your best interest to get rid of them. Matter of fact, I'll even put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury if you let me handle it." King Xerxes, probably not thinking too deep on it, just took off his ring, which was like the royal stamp of approval, and handed it to Haman. "Do whatever you want with them," he said. So, Haman got to work. He sent out an official decree to all the provinces, stamped with the king's seal, saying that on a specific day, the 13th day of the month of Adar, all the Jews, young and old, men and women, were to be wiped out completely. And to make it worse, whoever did the killing could take their victims' possessions. The news spread fast. Copies of the decree were posted everywhere, and the whole city of Susa was in chaos. While the king and Haman sat back drinking, chilling like it was just another day, the Jewish people were about to face one of the biggest threats in their history. And just like that, the countdown to destruction had begun. Esther 4, the call to step up. So, when Mordecai got the news about Haman's plan to wipe out all the Jews, he was devastated. He tore his clothes, threw on some sackcloth, and went out into the city wailing loud. This wasn't no quiet morning. He was making noise, and he wasn't alone. Jews all over the kingdom were fasting, crying, and putting on sackcloth and ashes, knowing their days were numbered. Now, Queen Esther was in the palace, and she hadn't heard about the decree yet, but her servants came running to tell her, "Yo, your cousin Mordecai is outside wilding. He's in sackcloth, wailing in the streets." Esther was confused and worried, so she sent fresh clothes for him, but he wasn't having it. Then she sent her servant Hathach to find out what was going on. Mordecai broke it all down, how Haman had played the king, how the Jews were about to get wiped out, and how she needed to go to the king and beg for their lives. He even gave her a copy of the decree to prove he wasn't making this up. But Esther hesitated. She sent a message back like, "Cousin, you know I can't just roll up on the king like that. Anybody who approaches him without being invited gets executed, unless he holds out his golden scepter. And it's been 30 days since he even called for me. What if he ain't feeling me no more?" Mordecai wasn't trying to hear that. He sent back a powerful message. "Don't think just because you in the palace you safe. If you don't step up, deliverance will come for the Jews another way, but you and your family won't make it. And who knows? Maybe you were put in this position for exactly this moment." That hit Esther different. She knew what she had to do. She sent word back. "Tell all the Jews in Susa to fast for me. 3 days, no food, no water. Me and my girls will do the same. And after that, I'll go to the king even though it's against the law. If I die, I die." Mordecai went and made sure every Jew in the city joined in the fast, and just like that, the stage was set. Esther was about to make her move. Esther 5. The setup begins. After 3 days of fasting and praying, Queen Esther got dressed in her finest royal fit and walked up to the king's throne room. Now remember, this was a risky move. If King Xerxes wasn't in the mood and didn't hold out his golden scepter, she could be executed on the spot. But as soon as the king saw Esther, he lit up. He stretched out his golden scepter, signaling she was good to approach. She stepped forward and touched the tip of it, playing it smooth. The king was so happy to see her, he said, "Esther, my queen, what do you need? I'll give you anything, even up to half my kingdom." Now, Esther didn't just blurt out her request, she played it smart. She said, "If it pleases you, I'd love for you and Haman to come to a private banquet I've prepared." Xerxes was down immediately. He called for Haman and they pulled up to Esther's royal dinner. While they were sipping wine, the king asked again, "All right, Esther, what's on your mind? Whatever it is, it's yours." But Esther kept it strategic. She replied, "My request? Come back tomorrow for another banquet, then I'll tell you everything." Haman's ego trip and instant karma. Now, Haman left that banquet feeling himself. He was thinking, not only am I the king's right-hand man, but the queen personally invited me to a VIP dinner, twice. His ego was through the roof. But on his way home, he saw Mordecai at the palace gate again. And guess what? Mordecai still wasn't bowing. Haman was heated, but he played it cool until he got home. Then he started ranting to his wife and friends. "I got money, power, status. I'm basically untouchable. But none of it matters as long as that dude Mordecai is still out here disrespecting me." His wife and friends had an idea. Why wait for the big execution? Build a 75-foot-tall gallows and have Mordecai hanged on it tomorrow. Then you can roll up to the queen's banquet stress-free. Haman loved the plan. He had the gallows built that very night, thinking he was about to handle his business. Little did he know, his whole world was about to flip real quick. Esther 6. The tables start turning. So that night, King Xerxes couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was God working. Either way, he called for the royal records to be read to him. Because, nothing puts you to sleep faster than history books. As they were reading, they came across the part where Mordecai had exposed the assassination plot against the king. Xerxes sat up like, "Wait a minute, what did we ever do to reward this dude?" His servants were like, nothing actually. Haman's awkward moment. Now, at that very moment, Haman was outside, coming to ask the king for permission to execute Mordecai on the gallows he just built. But before he could say anything, the king called him in and hit him with a question. "Haman, what should be done for a man the king really wants to honor?" Now, Haman, being full of himself, thought, "Oh, he's obviously talking about me." So he went all out. "Oh, your majesty, this man should be dressed in royal robes, ride the king's own horse, and have a top noble walk him through the city shouting, 'This is what happens when the king wants to honor someone.'" Xerxes nodded and smiled. "Bet. Do exactly that, for Mordecai the Jew, and make sure you don't leave out a single detail." Bruh. Haman was sick, but he couldn't refuse. So this man, who was just about to have Mordecai executed, now had to dress him up like royalty, parade him through the streets, and personally hype him up. Haman's worst day ever. After it was all done, Mordecai went back to the palace gate, chilling like nothing happened. But Haman, he went home humiliated. He told his wife and friends what went down, expecting sympathy, but they straight up told him, If Mordecai is Jewish and you already started taking L's, this ain't gonna end well for you. And before he could even process that, the king's men came knocking. It was time for Esther's second banquet. Haman didn't know it yet, but his real downfall was just beginning. Esther 7, Haman's downfall. So King Xerxes and Haman pulled up to Queen Esther's second banquet, ready to eat and drink like kings. But this time, the mood was different. After the wine started flowing, the king asked Esther again, "All right, my queen, what's your request? Whatever it is, even up to half the kingdom, it's yours." Esther drops the bomb. Esther took a deep breath and finally spoke her truth. "Your Majesty, if I've found favor with you, please spare my life and the lives of my people. We've been targeted for destruction, and if we were just being sold as slaves, I wouldn't have even said anything. But this is life or death." King Xerxes sat up real quick, confused and furious. Who would do such a thing? Who's out here plotting like this? Esther turned to Haman and pointed. "That man, Haman, the enemy of my people." Haman's worst nightmare. Haman's soul left his body at that moment. He was shook. Xerxes, beyond furious, stormed out into the garden to cool off. Meanwhile, Haman, knowing his life was basically over, threw himself onto Esther's couch, begging for his life. Now, at that exact moment, the king walked back in. And what did he see? Haman all up in Esther's space, looking real desperate. Xerxes lost it. "Oh, so now you trying to come for the queen in my own house?" The second those words left his mouth, the guards snatched Haman up. It was a wrap for him. The instant karma. One of the king's servants, Harbona, spoke up. Your Majesty, fun fact. Haman actually built a 75-foot gallows to execute Mordecai on. You know, the dude who saved your life?" Xerxes turned to Haman. "Oh, is that right? Hang him on it." And just like that, Haman, who planned to wipe out all the Jews, ended up swinging from the very gallows he built. Meanwhile, the king's anger cooled down. Esther had made her move, but the fight wasn't over yet. The Jewish people were still under threat. But trust, that was about to change too. Esther 8, the great reversal. So after Haman got what was coming to him, King Xerxes gave all of Haman's property to Queen Esther. And since Mordecai was like family to her, she brought him before the king and revealed that he was her cousin. Seeing how loyal Mordecai was, Xerxes took off his royal signet ring, the same one he had given to Haman, and handed it to Mordecai, officially making him the new top official. Esther then put Mordecai in charge of everything Haman had owned. The king's first decree still stands. Now, even though Haman was dead, his order to wipe out the Jews was still legally binding. Back in those days when the king made a law, it couldn't be undone, not even by the king himself. So the Jewish people were still in danger. Esther fell to her knees, crying, "Your Majesty, please cancel this order Haman made. My people are still about to be wiped out." Xerxes stretched out his golden scepter, which meant she was still in his favor, and told Esther and Mordecai, "Listen, I can't take back Haman's decree, but I'm giving y'all the power to write a new one in my name. Do whatever you need to do." Mordecai's power move. Mordecai wasted no time. He called in the royal scribes and dictated a new decree. The Jews were now allowed to defend themselves. On the same day they were supposed to be attacked, the 13th day of Adar, the Jews could fight back and destroy anyone who tried to harm them. They could also take the possessions of their enemies. This decree was written in every language of the empire and sent to all 127 provinces, including to the Jews themselves. The message went out fast. Couriers on royal horses raced across the kingdom to spread the word. From mourning to celebration, Mordecai stepped out of the palace looking like a whole king, rocking royal blue and white robes, a golden crown, and a purple cape. The people of Susa were hyped, celebrating in the streets. While the Jews had once been mourning, now they were rejoicing. In every city, wherever the decree was read, they turned up, feasting, partying, and praising God. And here's the crazy part. A lot of non-Jews saw what was happening and decided to switch sides, declaring themselves Jewish because they didn't want to be caught on the wrong team. Haman tried to destroy God's people, but now the Jews were standing stronger than ever. And soon, they were about to get justice. Esther 9. Victory in the birth of Purim, the day of the battle. The 13th day of Adar finally arrived, the same day Haman had planned to wipe out the Jews. But because of Mordecai's decree, the tables had turned. Instead of the Jews being slaughtered, they stood up and fought back. And listen, nobody wanted smoke with them. The fear of Mordecai had spread across the empire, and even government officials were helping the Jews, because Mordecai was that guy now. The Jews defended themselves and took down all their enemies across the provinces. In Susa alone, they wiped out 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. Yeah, his whole bloodline was done for. After the battle, King Xerxes went to Queen Esther like, "All right, you've won. 500 enemies gone in Susa alone. What else do you need?" Esther, keeping that same energy, replied, "Let my people keep defending themselves tomorrow too. Oh, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged publicly as a warning." The king agreed. On the 14th day of Adar, the Jews in Susa took out 300 more enemies, while in the provinces they had already defeated 75,000 people who had tried to attack them. But they didn't take any of their enemies' possessions. This wasn't about greed, it was about justice. The celebration begins. After securing the W, the Jews turned their grief into joy. Those in the provinces celebrated on the 14th of Adar. Those in Susa celebrated on the 15th of Adar, since they had fought an extra day. They feasted, shared gifts, and looked out for the poor, making sure everyone could celebrate. Mordecai then declared that these days should be remembered every year as a holiday called Purim, named after the pur, or lots, that Haman had cast to decide the day of destruction. This wasn't just a one-time celebration, it became a permanent festival for the Jewish people. Mordecai's legacy. The book wraps up by showing Mordecai's rise to power. He was now King Xerxes' second in command, respected by Jews and non-Jews alike. He used his position to protect his people, bring peace, and make sure justice was served. What started as a death sentence turned into a victory. What was meant for evil was flipped for good. Esther risked it all, Mordecai stayed faithful, and God showed up in the biggest way possible. And just like that, a nation that was supposed to be wiped out became stronger than ever. Purim became a reminder that no matter how bad things look, God's got the final say. Esther 10, Mordecai's legacy. This chapter is short, but it says a lot. King Xerxes continued to expand his empire, taxing all the lands he ruled. But the real spotlight? Mordecai. Mordecai had gone from being just a palace gatekeeper to the second most powerful man in the kingdom, right under King Xerxes himself. His story was written in the official records of Persia and Media, proving that he wasn't just some random guy, he was a legend. He wasn't just powerful, though, he was loved by his people. Unlike Haman, who used power for himself, Mordecai used his position to protect, uplift, and advocate for the Jewish people. The takeaway: Mordecai's rise wasn't luck, it was divine setup. He stayed loyal, played his part, and God made sure he ended up exactly where he needed to be. From Esther's courage to Mordecai's faithfulness, the book of Esther shows that even when God's name isn't mentioned directly, His hand is always working behind the scenes. And just like that, what started as a story of destruction ended as a story of victory, justice, and legacy.